What's going on, guys? BriarRabbit here. Tonight is the PlayStation 4 launch, so I couldn't be more excited. I'm going to go over to GameStop and pick up my PlayStation 4 at midnight tonight. Actually, I'm going over there at 6 p.m. before that to actually finalize payment and do all that stuff. I think they're doing some kind of launch event, so I don't think I'll stay there from 6 to midnight because that's 6 hours spent in a GameStop. That's an awfully long time. But I will be back at midnight, and I'll be picking the thing up, and I'll bring it right home, unbox it, and get playing on that thing. I really can't wait. It's been such a long time since we've had a new console, and kind of all day I've been thinking about like the previous generations of consoles that I've picked up and kind of what they meant to me. So I figured it'd make kind of a fun video to just kind of share those memories with you guys. The first console I ever got was a NES, obviously. Anybody my age, that's their first gaming experience. There's a lucky few who got a Sega Master System. That's kind of sarcastic. But the NES was, I mean, it was mind-blowing in its day. Now, you go back and you look at those graphics and they look horrible. They look like very blocky 8-bit graphics. But for its time, it was really revolutionary. It looked amazing. Mario was crazy. It was just, you'd never seen anything with so much detail and such good gameplay. And those controllers were also revolutionary. The 2-button gamepads, those original NES gamepads, were absolutely stunning. They were so easy to pick up and play. I mean, even my mother could play Mario, and, you know, she had no interest previous to that. So she actually brought it home for me for a Christmas present one year, and I played the snot out of NES. I can't tell you how many games I had for it. The original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comes into mind. Rygar, Strider. I mean, it goes on and on. Duck Hunt. I got the gun in Duck Hunt in the original console. Metroid. I mean, it just goes on and on. All those original classic NES games, they were just so influential. They're still being copied today, and it all comes back to that NES. And that was a huge event in my life, getting that NES, because it really kind of, I don't know, it shaped a path of video gaming that kind of I've been on ever since. The next one that came out was the Sega Genesis, and when I saw screenshots back looking in the old magazines, remember when magazines were a thing? Looking in the magazines, especially EGM, and looking at those Sega Genesis screenshots, I was unbelievably impressed. And I remember I had asked my father for it. He wasn't, I didn't really think he'd get it for me, but I figured it didn't hurt to ask. But he actually flew me out to visit in Chicago one Christmas, and there it was. It was sitting there waiting for me, and I got to play it while I was visiting him in Chicago. I actually remember going to work with him and hooking it up to the TV at his work and playing in the break room. That was amazing. And like some of the other employees would come in and like just sit there and watch. I mean, the Sega Genesis for its day, again, was just, it was mind-blowing. It was such a step up over the NES at the time that, I mean, just graphically, it was great. Unfortunately, the launch games weren't too hot. I remember I had Altered Beast. I think I had something called Last Stand or Last Battle. Nothing else was really that exciting until Sonic came out, and Sonic was really revolutionary. After that, the Super Nintendo came out, and I didn't get a Super Nintendo anywhere near launch. I already had a Sega Genesis, and the Super Nintendo was, you know, it was just an extra thing, and I didn't really feel I needed it until Street Fighter 2 came out. So Street Fighter 2 at the time was like all the rage. That and Mortal Kombat were like the two biggest games for teenagers at the time. And me being a teenager, I was in love with Street Fighter. We used to go to the arcade and play it. So the fact that they made a really good home version of Street Fighter 2, I just had to have it. So I actually went to visit my grandfather down in Florida, and he had me working with him as kind of like a summer job, and he helped me buy it. And that was really cool. The Super Nintendo, while it wasn't graphically that much more impressive than the Sega Genesis, it had better games, I thought, at the time. Especially Street Fighter 2, that was probably the most influential game. But it also had a bunch of like those Nintendo first-party games that were really, really amazing. That Super Nintendo, actually, I think was probably one of my most played consoles. Those guys lasted for a while. I added on all the gear to the Sega Genesis. I had a Sega CD that my mother had purchased for me. That thing was like $400 way back in the 90s. That thing was really expensive. And my mother made that happen, you know, and I really appreciated her. Like, that was a lot of money to be spending on a game system, and unfortunately the game system didn't turn out to be that awesome, but I'll always respect my mother for making that happen because that was a really expensive game system at the time. Actually, a couple of days after I got it, I was playing the Sega CD, and I actually yanked on the controller, and the whole thing came crashing down, totally destroyed the Sega CD. But luckily I was able to return it and get another one, but I felt so horrible. I remember going upstairs because I was in the basement when that happened and telling my mother, oh, I dropped the Sega CD, it's like in pieces. And so she brought me over to the store and we were able to return it and get another one, which was super lucky. I don't think I'd get away with that anymore in the days of these more strict return policies. Then the 32X came out for the Sega Genesis. Again, that was not a super successful system, but it did introduce me to Doom for the first time. So I actually remember having friends over, playing Doom, and we were all just enthralled. That was the first time I'd played, well, it wasn't the first time, but it was the first time I'd played a first-person shooter, like, in-depth. I dabbled with Wolfenstein a couple of times on actually our school computer, but that was the first time I really got into a first-person shooter, and I was hooked. I mean, Doom was crazy, and being able to play it on the 32X with the control pad, it wasn't the optimal way to play a first-person shooter, but it definitely whet a nerve that really I'm still trying to get back to. I mean, I play first-person shooters almost constantly now, and that really all started with the 32X and Doom. Later on, I got my first PC. That was actually when I left high school to go to college. My father actually bought me my first PC. That was a Pentium 75. And that was a further extension. More Doom got played on that, some Descent, some other games around that time, but the PC was amazing. It was so much more powerful than the consoles of the time, but it wasn't really a viable gaming machine at the time because it was just too expensive to keep upgrading it to keep up with the new games. So I haven't even gotten through half of this story yet, so I figure what I'll do here is I'll cut it off short here for this video, and I'll talk about the next consoles in the next video. I'll post them up real quick close to each other. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope you're enjoying this story. If you like this video, hit that like button. I really appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel, hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.